guys, some stupid sketch show guy here with another prehistoric figure review, and today's prehistoric figure review is going to be about a PNSO figure based off a theropod from mid-Cretaceous Africa. But it's not going to be about Spinosaurus this time, because I already reviewed that figure 7 months ago. This time, it's going to be about CAWCarcharo34, which, fun fact, is my favorite theropod dinosaur of all time. So, I have a lot of positive things to say about this. So without further ado, let's get into it. So first up, as always, we have the Paintjob, which PNSO used twice this year. First on this figure, and second on the Allosaurus. And you know what? I can't really blame them, because this figure looks really good. First, we got this lovely orange on the top jaw, along with some nice black striping on the bottom of the upper jaw. Looks really nice. As we move across the figure gets a bit lighter and more greener. And usually I'm not a huge fan of green on dinosaur figures, but you know what? I'll make an exception here because it's really well done. At the end of the figure, we have some nice orange, giving this figure a sort of spectrum. At the beginning there's orange, at the end there's orange, and in the middle there's something more mild. And of course the stripes add an extra layer to this figure, which is very awesome. On the bottom of the figure, it's a bit lighter in color, and I don't really mind it because it adds a nice little contrast to the darker colors on top. The only thing I kinda have an issue with though is this little throat thing right here, because it's a different color to the rest of the figure. Even the lighter stuff here on the lower jaw or on the neck is just a different color to this little bit right here, and honestly, it just sticks out like a sore thumb in my opinion. Even when you articulate the jaw, it's still kinda present, and I'm not really a fan of it. And as well as that, the little colors here on the crest, they kinda bug me. They look alright, but they kinda just look damaged without even looking damaged. It just looks like a paint effect, even though it was clearly intentional. So, besides those two nitpicks, though, this figure's color scheme looks very awesome and very lifelike, and I love it. And for that, I give the paint job a 8.5 out of 10. Next up is the pose. And you might think that I might dock a few points because this figure is currently leaning on a stand, but the figure doesn't necessarily need this to support itself. But it doesn't hurt because the figure is pretty easy to topple over, as shown right there. So it doesn't help to have the figure either lean on something if you're displaying it, or use the stand if it's standing by itself. However, it does have the ability to support itself if you're really careful. The main reason for this ricketiness, though, is because of the fact that only one sole of its foot is actually standing on the ground. The other one, only the tippy toes are there, because the figure is in mid-motion. It isn't in a solid standing pose like, say, some of the other figures I've reviewed. This figure is walking in mid-motion, and it's a pretty beautiful pose, showing the figure is down for business, ready to move around and kill something or somewhat. Either way, this dynamic pose, while it does sacrifice some stability, is really nice, and it means that you can take some really gorgeous photographs, as shown right here. It's a nice pose, but it does come at the cost for some stability, and for that, I give it a 7.5 out of 10. Next up, we have scientific accuracy, which I am not going to be reviewing by myself, but instead I'm going to be handing the reins to a reoccurring guest on my YouTube channel, CAWCarcharo34, as Carcharodontosaurus is his favorite dinosaur of all time. So, without further ado, here is CAWCarcharo34's scientific breakdown.
This figure is a great depiction of the accuracy of Carcharodontosaurus saharicus. The skull is within current depictions of the scientific literature, and it actually takes some liberties in not making this animal look very monstrous. There is a lack of a lacrimal crest or blade, as you can see it's quite small on this figure, but it also has quite rugose texture along the nares bar, which is characteristic of Carcharodontosaurus. However, it does obviously lack the lips that we would find in dinosaurs now, and it also has some shrink wrapping on the skull. The rest of the body is actually quite nice and in good proportion, especially to other allosauroids. And just back to the head for a quick second, but you can see that there is the lack of that characteristic notch or projection you would see in old reconstructions on the bottom jaw. So for accuracy, I give this dinosaur a 8 out of 10.
Thanks for the scientific insight, CAWCarcharo34, even though I could only understand about half of it. Last up, we got the detail, and when you zoom in on it, you can really see all of the individually sculpted scales. It's absolutely amazing to look at because it's so subtle yet so amazing. There's not a single part of this face that isn't unscaled. Even these subtle parts like the lower jaw where it's a little harder to tell, it's still all scaled up. And with places like, say, the black part of the upper jaw, it's amazing to look at, even from a farther distance, because you can really see all the scales so easily. Even in the parts where it's a little harder to see, the details and scales are just absolutely amazing to look at up close. And when you feel it, it feels like a real creature, and I absolutely love it. And it doesn't let up when you get past the face. When you go to the neck, you can see plenty of subtle sculpted scales, as well as little neck folds and skin folds. It has the whole package. Even on this little part that I'm not really a huge fan of, there still are plenty of nice sculpted scales on it. And then when you get to the mouth detail, it's pretty nice. Of course it has the little flaws that every single figure with an articulated jaw has, like the little seam and split here between the two gums, but I can forgive that. It's amazing to look at, and also the tongue. The tongue's pretty nice to look at as well. It's an amazing looking face, but as you move past it, the details, as mentioned before, don't let up. All these little scales move across the body beautifully. Go down to the leg, there's tons of scales, even down to this nice little foot. Or if we go back here, there's nice little folds around the tail and leg to kind of simulate the motion, and also more scales. Scales, 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 scales. It's amazing to look at. I know I've said that a lot, I sound like a broken record, but it truly is amazing to see all those little details mesh into one nearly perfectly detailed figure. And for that, I have to give it a 9.5 out of 10 on detail. And now time for my final thoughts. The paint job is amazing and lifelike. The pose, while a bit unstable, is very dynamic and nice to look at. The scientific accuracy is impressively up to date, and the detail is impeccable and nearly perfect. And with that, I give the PNSO Carcharodontosaurus an 8.5 out of 10, which is the highest rating I've ever given a figure on this series. Which of course means it gets the sketchy seal of approval, but it also gets a different honor, as my highest rated figure. And we'll see if something can beat it, but for now, I have my doubts. And if you guys are wondering, here's how the figure scales up to the previously reviewed Essian Spinosaurus, also made by PNSO. It's about the same length, but a bit longer, and they're about the same height if you count the sail, but for the most part, Essian is smaller and shorter than Gamba. And with that, I hope you enjoyed this video, and comment down what other figures I should review in the series. See you guys next time.